Welcome to Why I Left, a podcast exploring life-changing career moves. I'm your host, Brian Akar. Join me as I chronicle real stories from real people about the bold decisions that transform their careers and lives. Let's dive in. Hello, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of Why I Left. In today's episode, I have the privilege of speaking with Selena Ng, an accomplished HR professional with a wealth of experience in navigating change and driving strategic people programs in a global context. Join us as we uncover Selena's journey and gain valuable perspectives on resilience, adaptation, and the evolving landscape of work. Let's go check it out. All right, welcome back. So today we welcome Selena Ng to the show. With a background in HR consulting and leadership development, Selena brings a unique perspective to the table. Her experience spans across diverse roles, including a rotational leadership development program, which provided her with invaluable insights into managing change and driving strategic initiatives. Now, Selena's proficiency in leveraging technology and fostering relationships has been instrumental, especially during challenging times. So, Selena, thanks for joining me today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Brian. I'm pumped to be here.
Yeah, likewise. And so before we kind of get into some of your career pivots, would love to just get a sense as to who you are. And so tell us about some of the things that you've been passionate about professionally.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the question. So, professionally, I've always been really passionate about marrying a business strategy with a talent strategy and really just being a trusting partner to those that are trying to shape the business and are really forming what the results should be of the business. So I really enjoy building a robust talent strategy that is multi-pronged, to be honest. So first, you need to take care of the awesome people that you have, how you engage them, how you support them, grow them, incentivize them towards the right behaviors, etc. And this means building a really strong and aligned HR infrastructure program around performance, awards, recognition. Then you need to determine what skills are needed for your business to thrive, short-term and long-term, and candidly understand kind of the landscape of your talent marketplace and what's needed in order to develop those skills. And then it's so rewarding when you're actually able to make strides and see the talent strategy fully enabling the business to succeed. So what I'm passionate about professionally is just being able to marry those two, like what is needed from people, from the talent, from the workforce, in order to finally be able to achieve those business outcomes. And then finally, something else that I'm really passionate about is honestly just the trusting relationships that I make with the business and my HR peers overall. A lot of the times business partners need kind of that unbiased sounding board. I know you're in HR too, so sometimes people just need like a venting or a sounding board. And within this profession, I really value the solid relationships that I've made throughout my career, both within an HR network capacity, but also helping to support different business leaders as well.
All of that rings near and dear to my heart, having definitely been in that space as well. And, thinking about your career in HR, what initially sparked your interest? And really, how has your journey shaped your perspective on HR? Because I'll be honest, we've been getting kind of run through the mud over these past few years, right? So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, totally. And to your point, the HR profession has changed so much since when I first joined the career force. And so like a lot of HR professionals, I actually just fell into it. I don't know if you fell into it too, Brian, but
I did.
HR wasn't necessarily a thing that they taught me back in university or college. And so you just kind of fall into this industry, which is amazing. But back when I was in university, there was no push to get into an HR field, right? Like if you went to a business program, you were pushed into iBanking or consulting or accounting or something along those lines. But that being said, I found that more and more people are actually studying HR, investing in HR as part of their education, and getting into the profession with a better idea of what it actually entails. But I was lucky enough to early in my career to go through a rotational leadership program, which was amazing. And so I tried different roles throughout that included project management, product management, and then my last rotation was actually in HR. And as soon as I got into the role, I knew I found something that leveraged my strengths and I just enjoyed doing. And so I found that the rotational program really set me up to be able to adapt to new environments. And I've progressed throughout my career. As I've progressed throughout my career, I've been able to leverage this adaptability to try my hand at different industries within HR, global complex organizations and smaller startups, all while building my skills within talent management and then also within the HR business partner space. So I think that for HR professionals, we need to have the mindset of being able to try new things, try new organizations, try COE, try strict HRBP, in order to round ourselves out and really just diversify our skill sets. So that's kind of how I fell into it. It was just kind of like this awesome rotational program that gave me an opportunity, and I fell in love.
No, I love that. And, there's a key piece that you mentioned there too, that piece around not only working in the COE, but also working as an HRBP, because
Wow.
oftentimes the line of sight that you get working at a COE as opposed to working at a site or actually in the business is huge. And when people don't have that experience, I think it clouds sometimes their judgment on how to be a better supportive partner in the space. So I love that you mentioned that.
Yeah, totally. And I think to your point, having both sides of the coin from an experience perspective, COE or a center of expertise teams such as talent management or compensation or ERLR, like those are such pivotal things because you get to really build your skill sets. You get to build those building blocks in such a unique, in-depth way. But your main client is your HR business partner because you're trying to leverage those programs through your HR business partner. And the HR business partner is the one that has their feet to the ground, their employee pulse, because they're so much closer to the business. So having both sides of that experience, I found has been so invaluable. And even as I hire people or I look at candidates, like that is something that I check as a true unique thing to have.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. One of the things I was impressed with in your bio, it highlights your experience really consulting with senior leaders in a global organization, right? And you kind of touched on that a little bit. How has your approach to leadership and even collaboration evolved over these last few years, particularly as we think about navigating some of the challenges of this now remote workforce, dispersed workforce, hybrid, if you will?
Yeah, definitely. I've gotten more confident building relationships and influencing senior leaders, as we all do as we continue on in our careers. And directly reporting and supporting into CEOs and CHROs and different leadership levels. I've learned to adapt my communication style while still being authentic, to get the most out of each interaction. And so I've also found that while you need to learn the business and earn your credibility, of course, it actually has served me really well to connect with leaders on a personal level, which sounds so like
Right.
so logical. But I think that people forget that when they are coming into a new business and they're trying to establish themselves, that, the first things first is that you got to get to know them. And getting to know them means building an authentic relationship and getting to know them on a personal level to some degree. And so whether it be talking about travel or sharing horror stories about bringing up kids or, anything like that, supplementing that business credibility with artifacts about yourself shows, I think, that you're an actual human being and makes you more of an approachable leader and easy to relate to, which then in turn makes it easier for people to trust and listen to the advice that you give when it actually counts. And so understanding the business and demonstrating your ability to get results done is table stakes, obviously. Like, of course, you need to always demonstrate that. But I do believe that it's that a human element in a professional relationship that makes you kind of like this je ne sais quoi irreplaceable vibe and enhances your leadership profile and more likely for people to collaborate with you.
I agree. I think that's that you mentioned it, this piece around the human element. I think that's what helped me be, kind of successful in my role as well. Because I oftentimes, when you think of businesses and what they're doing, the people leading different initiatives, it's almost like they lose their humanity when they become senior directors, VPs and above.
Yeah.
But you can't have that. You can't do that, right? They're going through their own trials and tribulations, right? And so it's important to really connect with that. So I love that you mentioned that too. When it comes to some of the professional development work that you've done, you mentioned being a part of this rotational leadership development program. And
Yeah.
that must have offered so many diverse experiences, right? You're talking about obviously HR was at the end. So how did that program really prepare you for some of the unexpected challenges of, let's even go back to the pandemic, right? Or even
Yeah.
before, but the unexpected challenges of the pandemic, anywhere else, and what type of insights did you gain from working in these different roles annually?
Yeah, totally. And honestly, that rotational program that I found myself in was such an amazing training ground, Brian, to build resiliency and adaptability, and honestly, just the ability to make an impact on a business in a short period of time. Because my rotations were 12 months in length, with that, which at some point, especially for a new grad, you sound like, oh my God, I'm 1 year of my whole life. But the year goes so quickly. And I find that, as you know, like when people enter into a new job, 3 months, you actually feel like you potentially like know where the bathroom is and like how to actually find people. By 6 months, you maybe feel like you know what you're doing. And then by 12 months, you actually feel like you're able to produce something or contribute something a little bit more meaningful than just what was expected of you. And so, as I alluded to in the rotational program, what I did was 3 different roles in 3 years, and then applied this really to the rest of my career. And even if you looked at my LinkedIn, I've stayed in a role probably no longer than 2.5 years. And especially during the pandemic, the HR field, to your point, changed so rapidly. So being comfortable with change already and knowing I have the ability to pivot really helped my confidence to take on new challenges, especially during the pandemic. When right before the pandemic, I changed over to startup from a really legacy kind of financial services organization. And it was that ability of me being able to be adaptable and resilient, and pivot, that helped me tackle all of those new challenges. And so changing roles so quickly early on in my career, it forced me to leverage my strengths and apply my strengths to what needed to get done in the role. So making an impact, making an impression quickly. And I think that now that we're post pandemic, we're seeing people leave roles obviously more frequently than not. And this has become really important for all people and employers to know how to leverage people when you have them, because now that people aren't as sticky to their organizations and people are, coming and going, probably now more so within the first 4 years of working in an organization, businesses need to learn how to leverage their employees in the short term and medium term, and not just have this assumption that they're going to stay with them for 20 plus years.
No, without a doubt. Hence the reason for this show, right? And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
so here we talk about career transitions, why people leave, and it's a great segue into a little bit more about your story. So you left 2 HR positions over these past few years. That's a
Yeah.
significant decision, right? And so ultimately, what do you think? Which one was the most significant? And so why did you leave these jobs?
Yeah, totally. And so the first job that I left, I was a director HRBP at a financial services company here in Canada. And there was an opportunity for my partner and I to move to the UK. And, we didn't have a house here. We hadn't had children yet. And so nothing was really rooting us down to Canada per se. So we said, let's just take on a big adventure. And we moved to London, UK. And it was a big decision and it was a scary decision. It was hard for me at that point to leave my financial services organization, because they had treated me so well for the first 8 years of my career. I had built such a network and a family vibe with the folks that I had worked with there. I had just won Canada's top 100 most powerful women. I had an incredible internal network and sponsors. But honestly, I was at a point in my life where my partner and I, as I mentioned, didn't have many ties. And so when would we ever have a chance to live somewhere different and experience a different lifestyle? So it was definitely hard to take the leap, but I was constantly worried. Even when I was, thinking about moving to the UK, I was constantly worried about not being able to find a job. And oh my God, did I just shoot myself in the foot career wise by kind of lifting myself up from this amazing role in this amazing company, and not being able to find something in the UK. But in the end, I found a role at a totally different type of organization. And it was a startup, a scale up. And adapting to that environment was a challenge all on its own, but incredibly rewarding, and one where I grew so much. So that was the first reason why I left my first employer. And then we actually decided to move home during the pandemic. So we were living in London. pandemic hit, everything was in lockdown, obviously. And we knew eventually we wanted to move back to Canada, but we didn't know what the job market was going to look like back in Canada. And COVID was so uncertain. So I continued when I moved back to Canada on the startup and scale up train. But eventually, like many people, and I'll be candid, Brian, I bet on a scale up that unfortunately didn't work out in the best way. And so, as you know, there was a massive tech boom in 2023. There was a massive real estate boom back in 2023. So I ended up being made redundant, like a lot of HR people that we're seeing right now. And while it was a really difficult experience, I truly do think that it added to my resiliency and ability to stay confident in my skills. So at that point, I knew I wanted to be maybe potentially go back to a larger organization, but I still loved the idea of being able to build and shape. And that difficult time gave me space and perspective to really understand exactly what I wanted. And in the end, I made a career decision not based on climbing a ladder per se, but I knew I wanted to diversify my CV with various experiences, which I think makes me stand out as an HR professional overall. So I really do think that I've stayed true to the types of roles that I loved while stretching myself to work in different environments and countries. And the pandemic honestly just spurred me the ability to give me that time to find something different in the first instance. And then when it didn't work out and I was made redundant, I had that time during the pandemic in order to just, really figure out where I wanted and where I wanted to land.
I like that. So I'm hearing these themes of like being adaptable, right? Not only resilience, right, but change is also something that is happening all the time. And so when I
Yeah.
think about that, when we've talked about this, we've mentioned it a couple times here about how HR professionals are really often on that forefront of managing change. And I'll be honest, yeah, we're managing the change and then sometimes catching the flack for actually
Totally.
implementing the
Absolutely.
change, right?
Yeah.
So when you think about that, can you describe maybe a specific instance, either during the pandemic or otherwise, where you had to adapt quickly to some unforeseen circumstances? And how did you navigate through it?
Yeah, totally. So, as I mentioned, I joined a startup in the UK and we were in hyper growth mode. And it was just such a stark difference from moving from a very conservative financial services company to a startup that was just, printing money and blowing through money, which was a very cool experience. And we needed to staff up our contact center in the UK as quickly as possible. And the CEO had a customer service mandate that we needed to hit. And I remember it was 6 p.m. on a Thursday, getting the direction from the CEO to hire almost 400 people to ensure that we had the resources to meet our customer service needs. And, 400 people is just a crazy amount to do in the time frame that she wanted. But what we did is I pulled my team together. We worked through the morning to develop a hiring plan. We leveraged all the resources we could think of, agencies, mass recruitment days, expediting background checks, you name it. And we made this our sole problem to solve as a team. And that I really do believe that utter focus enabled us to action on our plans really, really quickly. So not only did we have to manage our own hiring process, but the entire employee life cycle, we needed to make sure that we had the resources to support for an additional 400 people, right? So onboarding, training, managers to enhance their performance, a performance system that enabled the growth of so many people. And so the burst of growth really forced me to think through all of the things needed to support an employee, stand up a program really quickly just by utilizing like a MVP or a minimum viable product mindset, just so we could operationalize as quickly as possible. So we hired these 400 people. And then, of course, COVID hit. And then we needed to furlough all of these people and determine how we could support them and keep them on remotely and manage our business costs. And so it was an absolute whirlwind, to say the least. But I think that's one of the strongest experiences that I have in adapting and managing a rapid change. And it was because of the growth of this organization and the economy that happened as we were growing.
No, that makes sense. Another theme that I hear throughout our conversation is the importance of building strong relationships, right?
Yes. Oh
And
my
it's
gosh, yes.
so crucial in HR. And so how did you maintain and really foster some of these connections with colleagues and leaders in this remote environment? And were there, any effective strategies that you found particularly useful that maybe could be helpful for someone listening?
Yeah. I And to your point, I joined an organization remotely during the pandemic. And
Yeah.
to be honest, it was really weird making relationships virtually. And, I'm a millennial, so I'm used to kind of that ability to go into the office and see people face to face. And I know a lot of Gen Zers right now, like they're so used to onboarding remotely. So it's a very different experience. But not being able to swivel around and ask somebody a question or put faces to names, but instead, more focused booking time in people's calendar and having the interaction be more formal because it's a set time that you need to fill. Right. So I personally found it super helpful as I was fostering those connections in a remote environment to have an org chart in front of me. And it sounds so simple and stupid, but literally that's the first question that I asked every single time I enter an organization is, can I see the organizational start chart and start booking one-to-ones with people in this priority order, which is my clients or the leaders that I support, my manager and direct reports, my key partners, and then finally key influential stakeholders or leaders. And I would honestly start by booking ad hoc meetings, but also not being scared to have repeating meetings in the calendar with these books. So it's not just a check one and done. I wouldn't book every week and bombard them, obviously, but at least having the time and calendar already planned, whether it be on a quarterly basis or whatnot, especially in a virtual setting, really help to create those organic connections without being able to necessarily bump into them in the kitchen or in the gym or whatever it may be. So if I could, I would always make an effort to meet with them in person, whether it be a coffee or a lunch break or a quick walk or whatever. And also, as I mentioned before, try to talk to them about something other than work and build that personal vibe. So ask about their recent holiday, their kids, their partner, how their home reno is going, anything to make them feel like we can establish a genuine connection. But I found that not only doing that, but kind of having those reoccurring meetings. Again, nothing too crazy, but just something in the calendar that reserves your time really helps in a remote organization.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And now you have what's great is you had a chance, didn't have any strings at the time, right? So you go to the UK, you're originally from Canada, and so you've worked in both of these markets. What were some, let's say, notable differences in HR practices between these regions? And how did these distinctions really shape some of your professional decisions, if at all?
Yeah. So besides the HR, legal requirements and laws, I actually found that the UK were a lot more social post work than in Canada,
Hmm.
and a lot more European, obviously, in that way. And in Canada, I found that many professionals, they want to go home to their loved ones, and their personal lives are a lot more separate from their work lives, which is amazing. In the UK, I did find that after work drinks, socials, lunches happened a lot more frequently. And this is where I think I got my knack for connecting with people about things outside of work. Because when you're at work, it's easy to only talk about work, right? And so when you're at a dinner or a lunch and you're waiting to get your order taken, the work convo eventually runs dry after a little bit. And you need to be able to pivot to different topics. And I think it's these different topics that opens a window to your authentic self. And I think it's a way for me to bring my full authentic self at work and in the way I build relationships with others. Because once you're kind of done your work chit chat, and whether it be over a drink or a social or a lunch, you then start talking about different things and you're able to connect with these work colleagues on different interests or different hobbies.
No, I love that. And so reflecting back on a lot of these experiences, what key lessons have you learned about resilience, adaptability, and really even the future of work that you believe are valuable for others facing similar challenges now?
Yeah. So during the pandemic, I think one of the key lessons I took away was the more quickly you acknowledge the change and work with others to collaborate a way forward, the better. And that's not to say you should accept every change that comes your way. If you have data and persuasive points as to why something should be done differently, then definitely state those. But when you're being approached with change, don't automatically say no and have that defense come up. And that might be easier for me than for others. But I find that if you express your thoughts and opinions using facts and data, acknowledge the benefits that might come with the change, and partner to come up with an even better solution, you inherently become more approachable versus being seen as a blocker. And you don't want to be a wall and you don't want to be defensive. You want to be seen as an elevator and someone who people can count on to manage change in the best way possible and make things better overall. So another lesson I think that I found is that you need sponsors and cheerleaders when you want your change to stick. And that's why making sound relationships is so important. You have followership when you're introducing something new.
I love that. Now, next part of the show is something that gets a lot of great traction from all the listeners who tune in. It's really the advice section. And so when you think about this, I want to focus, specifically on HR professionals, right? So what
Sure. Yeah.
advice would you give to HR folks currently facing the challenge of managing remote teams and maintaining employee engagement in this post-pandemic world?
Yeah. I mean, aren't we all facing this in our
Yeah.
HR jobs? My God, like this is
Yeah.
like the $1 million question is like, what do we do?
Yep.
In my mind, if you can't bring teams together, like even once a year, then I would make sure you have many virtual forums to foster organic connection. So whether that be a Slack or Teams channel or even a WhatsApp group, I feel as though you just need something for your team to be themselves with each other. And again, not just connect over work items. So I have a Teams channel with my current team. And yes, we chat about work, but we also post about, what we did over the weekend, pictures of our kids doing crazy things, links to concerts, to artists that we all like. And I think that those types of things really build that sense of belonging. And so I would also say if you're managing remote team members, please, please, please stay true to your one-to-ones. Treat them as sacred time and ensure you're letting them manage the one-to-one in the way that they like. You're the enabler and the coach as the HR person or as the manager and not the owner of the meeting. But if you're able to keep that sacred time, one-to-one time, I find that that goes a long way because in a virtual or a remote setting, if you don't honor that, you just lose the connection and you lose the momentum of the relationship.
That's solid, definitely. And now, pivoting a little bit for individuals who are thinking about a significant career change in uncertain times, which I would argue maybe now is still a little uncertain because I think a lot of obviously my show now is kind of it's broadening past the pandemic. But what I think about and I notice and I read is that a lot of the things that happened during that time are just now coming to the forefront for some people now that we're
Mhm.
their heads above water, right? And so thinking about that, for people thinking about a change now, what key factors should they consider to ensure their transition is both strategic and fulfilling?
Yeah, totally. And first thing that I want to say to those people that are transitioning, whether it was by your choice or not your choice, remember that you are not alone and finding a job can become a full-time job if you want it to. So do try to set guardrails for yourself. And when I lost my job, I honestly treated finding my job as a full-time job only because I had the time to do so. But even when I say I treated it as a full time job, I still only worked 9 to 5, worked 9 to 5. And then I reserved time for my loved ones and my hobbies and set goals for myself. So, for example, I would say I want to have 2 coffee chats a week, 5 applications a day, 4 hours of research time, blah, 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 blah. But when the clock hit 5 p.m., I said, okay, I'm shutting my laptop. Like I'm done work for the day. I'm done my job search for the day. And I would compartmentalize and spend time with my kid, my husband, make dinner, all of those types of things as you normally would with a regular role. And so finding your next role can be a daunting and overwhelming experience. And if you set limits for yourself, it will feel a lot more manageable versus something that is just always clouding your mind. And I would also say, don't sell yourself short. So don't take that first job or don't settle for something if you really feel it's not a good fit. Companies are hiring. Companies will always continue to hire. And we continue to grow post pandemic. And there is a job for you out there. So don't feel as though you need to settle right away. Find that sweet spot, as I did, between waiting for something amazing and how long you're comfortable actually waiting for that role. But it's hard. I know it's hard to do, and I have gone through it, and I felt that tension between really just wanting a job, but also making sure that I wanted to land somewhere that was really wonderful. So take the time, make sure that you are really doing some inward looking as to what you want, and be mindful about where you apply and who you network with, just so that you are managing your expectations and managing your time in the most focused way possible.
Oh, I love that. And as you look to your future, what type of impact are you hoping to have in this next chapter of your professional life?
Yeah, yeah. It's like, what do I want to be when I grow up? Um, being back in Canada for 4 years now, I think my family and I are thinking about that next adventure. So, albeit I'm in a very different place than when I was last time I packed up and left, but we're open to different opportunities and experiencing new lifestyles, especially while children are young. And so it's easier to kind of pick up and maybe start fresh. And I want to be able to better diversify my HR skill sets in general. So being an HR then talent partner is, my bread and butter. But I want to ensure that I elevate myself and constantly develop new skills. And as always, when it comes to impact, I want to say that I helped make a change for the better. So help the business, help the employees. And that's why I try to be really open in my career, because you can accomplish making an impact in so many different ways and through so many different avenues. So it's not a great answer to your question, Brian. It's pretty broad, but I like the fact that it's broad and open. And then that means that a whole bunch of opportunities can potentially pertain to me in the future.
I do too. I do too. Keep it broad, right? Because you never know
Yeah.
what could just come inside. So no, I love that. And so now, would love to give you an opportunity. This was another piece of the show that got some really great feedback, to ask me a question, right? So what's one question you have for me that I could potentially answer?
Yeah, one thing that I was interested to hear from you, Brian, and I've listened to a number of your previous episodes, is how have you changed your perspective on your career after hearing from all of these guests, and now that we're in this post-pandemic world? So has talking to all of these people changed your perspective on where you want to be when you grow up, and how you see HR and your future?
So that's a great question. So I think what a lot of these conversations have done for me is, and kind of going back to an earlier thing we talked about, is the humanity of us all.
Mm.
It has given me a better glimpse into the fact that the things that we're all going through, we don't talk about enough. Hence, like the show, right? Like resigning from a job, pivoting from your career, is something that is still seen as so taboo, but more and more people are starting to talk about that. And
Mhm.
I've loved to see that. So seeing the humanity of it all has been one. The other piece is that, as I have, and this was truthfully kind of as it was, not only going through the show, but going just through the period I was at in my professional life, because I was in a traditional HR role for many years. Then I moved to like a chief of staff role, and then now I'm in this like workforce and community education space.
Oh, cool.
And what I think I've found, but it's like my chief people officer always tells me, once you're in HR, you're in HR forever. So I was like, okay, I'll take it, right? But what I've learned throughout this is that, because when I was in the HR space, I was chasing titles, right? And I'll be
Mhm.
honest, I was actually chasing CHRO, CPO, whatever you want to call it, and I couldn't really pinpoint why at the time. Hindsight, truthfully, it was probably just, I would say smoke and mirrors, but prestige, to
Yeah,
just to say I made it there. Obviously, money
totally.
would be a thing. But as I've gone through a lot of these conversations and just life overall, I've realized that I don't need to do that. I don't need that like, who am I trying to validate for, right? I can validate myself in a way that I can work in something that has a lot of purpose. And I've found that. And so that's what I've kind of been doing now. So it's so interesting how things work, life works,
Totally.
in that I've had some very good opportunities. The pandemic was a huge spark for me too, hence the show, hence a lot of different things. But I've got an opportunity to really think about, what impact am I trying to have, right? So I asked you about the impact for the future. I had to take a look and think about the impact I also want to have. And now I'm starting to have that, especially in the education and the youth space. And so now it's about expansion. And so that's what's been great about having these discussions, because even though I may not have been seeking validation from guests, it has been almost validating to hear that everyone else is going through a similar type of thing, and realizing that we can do whatever it is you want to do. And you just got to find a way to get it done. So
Yeah.
that's what I've been.
Yeah, I'm so with you, Brian. And to your point, like it sounds all your answer around, having that human element, making an impact, being able to help people, honestly, is what it comes down to, right? And I think that a lot of folks in the HR space, everybody, I think, in their role, regardless of if you're in HR or not, you just want to be able to help and either move something forward or do good for others or help others through a specific transition. And I think that's why it's so wonderful that you've been able to pivot to so many different things and so many different roles and try new things like this podcast, because it just, one, widens your skill set and your versatility. But then to your point, you're making an impact in so many different ways. So that's awesome to hear. And I'm so glad that you've been able to get that insight or at least learn that about yourself after talking to so many of these awesome people.
Yeah, no, thank you. So great question. Appreciate you asking that. Well, Selena, look, I'm going to thank you for joining the show today. I always like to give shout outs to how I get connected with guests. And so I'll shout out the 10KC team here,
yes,
right? For connecting
10,000 coffees.
Yes,
they're amazing.
Yes. So they connected us. And so I appreciate that. Dave and Mike connected me with you. And so it's really been a pleasure, hearing your story, and would love for you to share where our listeners can either find you, support you, connect with you.
Yeah, definitely. So you can always find me on LinkedIn, obviously, Selena Ng. I have my profile there. I would love to connect with folks over there if you also have a LinkedIn account. And, if you have any questions about my career or HR in general or managing through a change that you're going through, I am all ears. So please don't hesitate.
Love that. And I also think, now keep me honest, this was your first podcast?
Yeah, it was great. It was such a experience.
Look, and you did wonderful. So, are you available for other bookings just in case? Right?
People yeah, yes.
I love that,
in, Brian.
I love that. So putting that out there for, in the world. So thank you for all that info. I'll make sure I share all that in our show notes. So thanks again for joining, and I hope you all enjoyed our discussion. I hope you have a great week, and we'll make sure to see you next time. Selena, thanks again for joining.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Why I Left. Join us next time for more inspiring stories about growth, resilience, and transformation. Visit us online at www.whyileft.co. That's whyileft.co. And subscribe on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or the Alive Podcast Network. See you soon.